Have you ever lived your whole life, giving everything you had, every drop of sweat, every ounce of hope, only to find out one night that, to the people you sacrificed for, you were nothing more than a bill to be paid? Just another expense, like electricity or groceries. That's the moment that tore me apart. And strangely enough, it was also the moment that forced me to truly see myself. Thank you for being here with me tonight, for lending me your ears and maybe even a little piece of your heart. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell, but they're even harder to carry alone. So if you're listening now, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Morning light streaming through your blinds? Or is it midnight, the hour when thoughts grow loud? Doesn't matter, stories have their own time. And mine begins long before tonight. My name is Helen White. I live in a small town in the northeastern part of the United States. A place where the maples turn fiery red in October, and where the grocery clerk knows your first name even if you've never spoken outside the store. They say in towns like this, everybody knows your business. Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the most important truths stay locked behind the walls of your own house, rattling like ghosts that nobody else can hear. I was born here, raised here, married here. My husband, John White, was the kind of man who could make a whole room laugh just by raising one eyebrow. He worked as a mechanic, hands always covered in grease, but his heart was tender. He used to tell me, Helen, life is like fixing an engine. You can't run it on hope alone. You gotta put fuel in, you gotta change the parts when they're worn, and sometimes you gotta know when to let the old car rest. Funny thing is, he never let me rest. He believed in me, in the way my laughter filled the kitchen, in the way I could stretch $1 into a meal for 3. But John left early. A heart attack took him one winter morning, quick as lightning on a clear day. 1 minute he was sipping his black coffee, the next he was gone, the cup still steaming on the table. I was 36. My son David was just 10. In one night, my world shrank to a single word, survival. You know the saying, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Well, life didn't just hand me lemons, it threw the whole orchard at me. I worked 2 jobs days at the grocery store, nights cleaning offices downtown. My hands cracked from the bleach, my feet swelled from standing, but I didn't complain. A mother's love isn't measured in comfort. It's measured in how much she's willing to endure so her child doesn't have to. David was my reason. I packed his school lunches, attended every parent-teacher conference even if I came straight from mopping floors, and I cheered the loudest at his basketball games. He was my basket, my eggs, my whole farm. People told me, don't put all your eggs in one basket, Helen, but what else did I have? David was my everything, and I carried that basket like it was made of gold. Time passed. David grew. He graduated college, the first white in our family to do so. I still remember the day he walked across that stage. My hands were shaking holding the camera, and tears blurred the lens, but I kept snapping pictures anyway. Because that moment, that cap and gown, felt like proof that every long night, every aching muscle, every tear I swallowed back had been worth it. Years later, David married Emily. She was smart, organized, with the kind of sharpness that made her good at her job, but sometimes left people a little cautious around her. Don't get me wrong, she wasn't cruel. She just had that straight line in her personality, firm, uncompromising. Where David inherited my softness, Emily was more like steel. They bought a house here in Maple Creek, a beautiful two-story with white shutters and a maple tree out front. And they asked me to move in with them. I remember David saying, "Mom, it'll be easier this way." You'll have your own room, you can be with the kids, and we'll all be together. I smiled, because in that moment I thought, God, you've given me back a family. My room had a window facing the maple tree. Every morning, the sunlight filtered through red and orange leaves, painting the walls in shades of fire. I used to sit there with my coffee and whisper, John, we did it. We got him here. The grandkids came Michael first, then Sophie. 2 bundles of pure joy. Michael with his curious eyes and endless questions. Grandma, why is the sky blue? Grandma, how old are dinosaurs really? And Sophie, my little ribbon girl, always twirling around the living room with bows in her hair, asking me, Grandma, what were colours like when you were my age? I'd laugh and tell her, they were just like your ribbons, sweetheart bright enough to make the whole day smile. Those children gave me life again. I cooked for them, told them bedtime stories, kissed their cheeks until they wriggled away giggling. They'd run into my room early mornings, crawling under my quilt, and I'd tell them tales about deer wandering into towns or rabbits that could talk. Their laughter was medicine to me, a reminder that love multiplies when you give it freely. But life isn't a storybook, is it? Real life has shadows that creep in slowly. And sometimes those shadows are in your own home. Emily, my daughter-in-law, was polite to me, even respectful, but I could sense something beneath her tone. She liked order, discipline. She managed the house like a company budgets, calendars, schedules. If I moved something in the kitchen, she'd gently but firmly remind me to put it back. We need structure, Mom Helen, she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I nodded, always nodded. I didn't want to be trouble. I told myself, you've lived enough storms. Helen, just keep the peace. And David. Well, David was busy. Work swallowed him whole. Always on his phone, always in meetings, rushing in and out like a man chased by his own clock. Sometimes he'd kiss my cheek and ask if I was okay, but before I could answer fully, his phone would buzz and off he'd go. I told myself he still loved me, just distracted. Just overwhelmed. One evening, the rain was falling soft outside, the kind that taps on the roof like fingers playing a sad piano tune. I just finished washing the dinner plates, wiped down the counters, and settled into the old rocking chair in the living room. David's phone was on the couch beside me, its screen glowing like a little lighthouse in the dark. He must have left it on speaker by mistake. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I swear I didn't. But his voice came through, tired, heavy. I can't keep her here forever. She's just an old expense. At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe he said experience or expression, but no. The word was clear, expense, old expense. My son, the boy I raised through hunger and cold, the boy I worked my fingers raw for had reduced me to a line item on his budget. My heart stopped. My hands gripped the chair so tight the wood creaked. I wanted to cry out, to shout, I'm not an expense, I'm your mother. But my voice was locked somewhere deep inside, frozen. Emily's voice followed, calm, practical. David, we need to be realistic. The kids' tutoring, the mortgage, the car insurance, it all adds up. And your mom. Well, she's another cost. We can't keep carrying everything. That word carrying cut me deeper than expense. As if I were a burden slung over their backs. As if my very presence weighed them down. I sat there, staring at the maple tree outside the window, its leaves glowing under the street lamp. And in that moment, I remembered something John once said. Helen, you can't live in someone else's pocket forever. The day they think you're weighing them down, you've got to step out and stand tall, even if it's on shaky legs. I didn't cry, not then. I just felt hollow, like a house where all the furniture has been sold, but the walls are still standing, empty, echoing. That night, lying in bed, I opened an old box I kept by my nightstand. Inside were John's letters, faded photographs, and a tiny envelope holding David's baby teeth from when he lost them at 6. I held those little teeth in my palm, bone-white reminders of the child I once carried everywhere. My son, my basket. And now, to him, I was just a bill to be managed. I whispered into the dark, if I am an expense, then I am the expense that bought his life, his education, his home. I paid in nights without sleep, in hands red from bleach, in dreams deferred. And still, it wasn't enough. Life has a cruel way of teaching you lessons you never asked for. They say no good deed goes unpunished. That night, I believed it. But another truth also surfaced inside me. I will not let anyone write the last chapter of my story except me. And so, quietly, silently, a decision began to bloom inside me. A decision that would change everything. They say silence can be louder than thunder. That night, my silence roared inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into David's room demanding answers. I just sat in my rocking chair, the same one John bought for me when I was pregnant, and let the words sink into my bones. She's just an old expense. Sleep didn't come. My bed felt like a raft drifting on open sea, no anchor, no shore in sight. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan turning, each slow blade slicing through the dark like it was cutting time into smaller and smaller pieces. Hours passed, but inside me, the words kept echoing. Old expense, burden, cost. When dawn finally came, pale and watery through my window, I had aged 10 years in a single night. I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, John, I wish you were here. You'd know what to do, but he wasn't. It was just me. Me and a truth too sharp to ignore. Life has a way of piling small hurts on top of one another until one day, a single feather breaks your back. I'd endured little things, Emily's sigh when I forgot to put the salt shaker back, David's distracted nods when I tried to tell him about my day, the way conversations hushed when I entered a room. But that phone call, that was the feather, and it broke me. The days that followed felt different. The house looked the same, but my eyes had changed. Every corner carried an echo I hadn't noticed before. Emily at the kitchen table with her spreadsheets, whispering about budget cuts, David tapping on his laptop late into the night. The grandkids running through the hallway, laughter spilling out like sunshine. And me moving like a ghost through it all, my heart stitched with invisible thread that tugged tighter with every step. I cooked breakfast as usual. Pancakes for the kids, scrambled eggs for David, oatmeal for myself. Michael bit into his pancake and said, Grandma, you make it better than Mom. I smiled, though my chest hurt. Emily raised an eyebrow, forcing a smile of her own, and said, Well, Grandma's got years of practice, sweetheart. Her voice was light, but her eyes said something else. Something like, this won't last forever. After breakfast, I walked the kids to the bus stop. The maple leaves crunched under their sneakers, red and gold confetti scattered by the wind. Sophie slipped her hand into mine and whispered, Grandma, are you sad? Out of the mouths of babes, they say. Children see things adults try to hide. I squeezed her hand and said, just a little tired, honey. But I'm okay. She didn't believe me. She hugged my arm tighter, as if she could hold me together with her small strength. Back home, I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, watered the plants. My routine was my refuge. But even the dishes seemed to whisper that word back at me. Expense, expense, expense. I thought of the years I'd stretched $1 till it screamed how I made soup from bones. How I patched David's jeans 3 times before buying a new pair. Expense. How ironic. I'd been the one cutting corners, and now I was the corner to be cut. That night, I dreamed of John. He stood at the edge of a field, his hands in his pockets, his smile crooked. "Helen," he said, "you've always been stronger than you think. Don't let anyone turn you into an entry on a ledger." I reached out for him, but he faded like smoke in the wind. I woke with tears on my cheeks. The next morning, Emily cornered David in the kitchen. I heard them before they saw me. "David, we can't put this off," she said. "Your mom is sweet, but she's getting older. What if she falls? What if something happens? We can't carry all this responsibility forever." A nursing home isn't cruel, it's practical. My knees nearly gave out. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. Practical, that's what they called it. I was no longer a mother, a grandmother, a woman. I was a liability, a risk. Something to be managed. David sighed. "Let's not talk about this right now. The kids love her." His voice was softer, uncertain. But not once did he say, "I love her." That absence stung worse than Emily's practicality. I slipped back into my room before they could see me. I sat on the bed, clutching the quilt John's mother had made for us as a wedding gift. Every stitch was a prayer, she used to say. I wondered what kind of prayer could protect me now. For days, I carried that conversation like a stone in my pocket, heavy and cold. I still cooked. I still told bedtime stories. I still kissed my grandchildren goodnight. But inside, something was unraveling. I caught myself staring at the maple tree, imagining myself walking away from this house, leaving it all behind. Could I do it? At 73, could I start over? Life truth, sometimes the hardest part of leaving isn't the act itself. It's the moment you realize you're no longer wanted. That realization lights a fire under your feet. One afternoon, as I sorted old boxes in the attic, I found an envelope John and I had tucked away decades ago. Inside were the papers for a small piece of land we'd bought once, for emergencies. John had joked, "This is our rainy day woodpile, Helen, when the storm comes. We'll have something to burn." My hands trembled holding it. Maybe this was the storm he'd meant. That evening, Michael crawled onto my lap with a school drawing. "Look, Grandma," he said, "I drew our family. See? That's you, with a smile." I looked at the crayon figure-round glasses, grey hair, big smile, and my throat tightened. I wondered how long that smile would stay in his drawings if I wasn't here. Sophie joined us, pressing a sticker into my palm. "For you, Grandma. Because you're the best. Children don't know about budgets and expenses. They only know love." Later, when the house was quiet, I sat at my desk and wrote in my journal. I refused to be carried as a burden. I will walk on my own legs, even if they are weak. I will leave with dignity, not wait until they push me out. The decision grew roots. I went to the bank, quiet as a shadow. The young teller smiled politely as I explained. She asked if I wanted financial advice. I told her, "Sweetheart, I've been balancing life on pennies since you were in diapers. I just need my own 2 feet again." Back home, I began packing slowly, carefully. Just a few things at first: John's letters, the children's photos, a quilt, enough clothes to fill 1 suitcase. I hid it in the back of my closet. Each item was a thread of my life, and I was weaving a new story. That night, while the family watched TV, I sat alone in my room writing a letter. My hand shook as I formed the words, "Thank you for everything, but I choose dignity over dependence." I told them I was leaving, not out of anger, but out of love for myself, and maybe even for them. Better to go while I could still stand tall than wait until they resented me fully. I ended the letter with one final truth. All that I own, I leave to David, but only on one condition. He must visit me once a week. If love is still in his heart, he will come. If not, Then perhaps money will reveal what love could not. When I finished, I folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of freedom blooming inside me. Like a bird testing its wings before flight, people say, home is where the heart is, but sometimes home is where the hurt is. And when the hurt grows heavier than the love, you have no choice but to take your heart somewhere new. I knew my time in that house was ending. The decision was made. The only question left was when. Asterisk, they say leaving is never about the door you walk out of, it's about the heart you carry with you. And mine felt heavier than a sack of wet cement the morning I decided my time in that house had ended. It wasn't sudden. The decision had grown inside me like a stubborn weed, roots deep, unshakable. Each night after that phone call, I'd picture myself walking away. Some nights, I'd imagine doing it in the dead of dark, slipping out like a thief with only my suitcase. Other nights, I thought of leaving at noon, sunlight streaming down, my grandchildren watching from the porch, not understanding why Grandma was walking away. Both visions broke me, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay. The hardest part of leaving isn't packing a suitcase. It's packing your memories, folding them into corners of your mind and praying they don't spill out when you're alone. I began in small steps. I tucked John's letters into a little box, slid my wedding ring onto a chain I could wear under my blouse. I packed photographs David's high school graduation, the grandkids' Christmas mornings, one faded picture of me and John standing by the ocean, wind whipping our hair, laughter frozen in time. Clothes came next, not many, just enough to last me a week. When you're 73, you stop caring about variety. A sweater to pairs of jeans, a dress for church, that was plenty. I hid the suitcase behind my old cedar chest. Every time I opened that closet, I'd glance at it and feel a quiet strength rising. My escape plan, sitting silently among mothballs and forgotten blankets. But leaving wasn't just about packing, it was about saying goodbye, even when I couldn't use words. I found myself watching the grandchildren with sharper eyes. Every laugh, every hug, every good night, Grandma, I tucked away like jewels in a velvet pouch. Michael would sit at the kitchen table, head bent over his homework, and I'd stare at the curve of his neck, remembering David at that age, pencil clutched tight, tongue poking out in concentration. Sophie would twirl in her ribbons, giggling when she fell, and I'd think, this is what joy looks like. And I've been lucky to see it. Life truth. Children don't realize they're making memories for you while they're just living their ordinary days. I never told them I was leaving. How could I? You don't tell a child that their safety net is folding itself up and walking away. Instead, I gave them pieces of myself in quiet ways. I baked their favorite cookies and slipped extra into their lunch bags. I taught Sophie how to braid her hair the way my mother once taught me. I gave Michael an old compass John had owned, whispering, whenever you feel lost, hold this. It'll remind you that finding your way is always possible. Emily stayed busy, as she always did. Calendars, bills, schedules. She noticed me less, and in a way that made leaving easier. Her sharp lines had boxed me in for too long. David was still a blur of meetings and emails, running so fast he never noticed I was already standing on the edge of goodbye. The night before I left, I sat at my desk with a blank page. The letter. My hand trembled at first, but once the pen touched paper, the words poured out. David, thank you for everything you've given me this roof. Your children's laughter, even your presence. Fleeting though it often was, I will never forget it. But I choose dignity over dependence. I cannot stay where I am seen as a burden. I raised you to stand tall. Now it is time for me to stand tall, too. I paused, tears blurring the ink. My heart ached with every word, but it also felt lighter, freer, like unburdening myself after years of silence. I continued, "To you and Emily, I leave my love, whether you want it or not. And to my grandchildren, I leave the memory of a grandmother who adored them. As for my possessions, they are yours, David, but with one condition: you must visit me once a week. Not for the inheritance, but for the simple truth that love is proven by presence, not words. If you cannot do that, then perhaps money will reveal what love could not." I folded the letter carefully, sealed it, and placed it on the nightstand where he would surely find it. Morning came grey and damp, a mist curling through the maple branches. I woke early, before the children stirred. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the pause before a storm. I dressed slowly, pulled on my coat, and lifted my suitcase from its hiding spot. My legs shook under the weight not of the bag, but of the choice. I walked through the hallway one last time. The walls held echoes of family dinners, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories. My footsteps sounded louder than usual, as if the house itself knew I was leaving Dot in the living room. I paused by the rocking chair. I placed my hand on its worn armrest, remembering all the nights I'd sat there, holding crying babies, watching over sick children, or simply rocking away my own loneliness. "Goodbye," I whispered, and the chair creaked as if it answered back Dot at the front door. I hesitated. My heart tugged me back toward the kitchen where Sophie's crayon drawings still covered the fridge, toward the bedrooms where Michael's laughter still lingered. But I reminded myself, love doesn't mean staying where you're unwanted. Love sometimes means leaving before resentment grows so deep it can never be uprooted. I stepped outside. The cold air stung my cheeks, sharp as truth. The maple tree swayed gently above me, scattering a few leaves at my feet, as if giving me a blessing. I walked down the driveway, suitcase bumping behind me, and didn't look back. If I had, I might never have left. I had already arranged a small apartment in a neighboring town. Nothing fancier, one bedroom on the second floor, with a narrow balcony and a view of the river. The landlord, a kind woman named Mrs. Parker, helped me carry my bag up the stairs. "It's cozy," she said. "Perfect for someone who likes peace, peace." That was exactly what I craved. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and emptiness, but I filled it with the few things I'd brought. John's letters on the nightstand, the quilt on the bed, photos propped against the wall. Slowly, it began to feel less like a stranger's place and more like a refuge. That first night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, listening to the river's steady hum. It reminded me of John's voice, low, comforting, always moving. For the first time in years, I felt still, but freedom has its own loneliness. The silence was thick without Michael's questions or Sophie's giggles. I missed their little feet pattering down the hall, their warm hugs. My heart ached, but I reminded myself, better to miss love from afar than to suffocate in a place where love feels conditional. Days passed. I settled into a routine. Morning walks by the river, groceries from the small market downtown, evenings writing in my journal. I spoke to neighbors politely but kept to myself. Privacy was a bomb I hadn't realized I needed. 1 week later, there was a knock at my door. My heart leapt. Could it be David? But when I opened it, only Mrs. Parker stood there with a bag of cookies. "Thought you might like something sweet," she said kindly. I smiled, grateful, though my chest ached with disappointment. David didn't come that week. Or the next. I told myself he was busy, overwhelmed. I told myself love takes time to remember. But deep down, I wondered if maybe he'd already forgotten. Maybe to him, I really was just an expense, now neatly subtracted from his life. Still, I held on to hope. Because life truth, a mother's hope is the last thing to die. Meanwhile, in their house, I imagined Emily finding my letter. I pictured her reading it, her sharp eyes narrowing, her lips pressing thin. I imagined David's face, pale, guilty, torn between relief and regret. Did they feel lighter without me? Did they miss the smell of my soup, the sound of my stories? Or was my absence the space they'd been craving? The twist in all this, the only power I had left, was the condition in my will. Everything I owned, small though it was, would be David's, but only if he came to me once a week. It wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. Would he choose presence, or would he let absence grow like ivy until it choked out even memory? Some nights I lay awake asking myself the same question: was I wrong to leave? Should I have endured for the sake of the grandchildren? But then I remembered that phone call. That word, expense, and I knew the answer. Staying would have killed me slowly. Leaving gave me back my soul. Weeks turned into months. The grandchildren wrote me little letters, smuggled through the mail. Crayon hearts, stick figures of grandma. Each envelope smelled faintly of peanut butter sandwiches and childhood. I kissed those papers like they were holy relics. Emily's handwriting never appeared. David's rarely. But the children still loved me without counting costs. And that, in the end, was enough. They say you can't choose how you enter this world, but you can choose how you leave it. I chose to leave that house not with bitterness, but with dignity. I chose silence over shouting, walking away instead of breaking down. My story may sound sad, but it is not. It is a story of strength. One day, when David finally comes, if he does, he'll find me on this balcony, watching the river flow, holding the compass I gave to Michael. And maybe then he'll understand, love was never about the money. Love was about showing up, week after week, year after year. Until then, I wait, patient, steady, like the river outside my window. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't anger. It's living well, with your head held high, while the people who doubted you wonder how you found the strength to do it. And that, dear listener, is what I learned. Never let anyone reduce you to an expense. You are the foundation, the stone, the root. Without you, the whole house falls. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have stayed, or would you have walked away?